Well, hello everybody. Happy Tuesday and happy Monlam Chinmo. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. My name is Jack and I'm here with my very excellent Sangha friend, Sangha brother, Daniel. Hey,
Howdy,
Daniel.
Jack. Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Happy Monon Chenmo and all that.
All the things. Yeah. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to be talking tonight about a really interesting and kind of vast topic that we'll really only be just barely scraping the surface of, but it's that of spiritual materialism. And we'll dig into what that means. It's kind of, it sounds like kind of a oblique term, but it's really important for all of us who are trying to get into a deep spiritual practice to look into. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you tonight, Daniel.
Me too. I couldn't agree more. It's a
Yeah.
topic I think that we'll probably have to revisit, at least on a personal level in our practice multiple times. At least I will. Maybe not you.
Oh, yeah, definitely me as well. I'm in the materialism all day, most days.
Yep.
Well, Daniel, let's check in a little bit. How are you doing? What's your life, your world been like?
I'm good. I'm good. I had a nice weekend with my kids. It was the first time that they've ever had a sleepover with their friends at my place.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was really fun. Like it was such a joyful, like all the laughter, and they were all like all of them having a good time together and stuff. And then the next day we all got up and we went to Six Flags in Vallejo,
What?
Yeah, we rode rides and all that stuff. It's off season, so there were no lines. It
Yeah.
was phenomenal. The weather and sort of the fact that it wasn't on, in the main part of the season for amusement parks made it really quite wonderful. At least for me, I
Nice.
don't like large crowds, so it was like the perfect thing.
Nice.
So that's going well. My practice is stabilizing. I've had it, a little bit rough trying to get. I'm practicing, I'm meditating every day, but it's been like it hasn't, my regular routine's been somewhat disrupted because life has gotten busy between
Sure.
family and work and other responsibilities. It's just sort of like throwing me off a little bit. And so I just like it's stabilizing now, which is nice. It's getting kind of into a kind of a more regular pattern, more rhythmic. And I really appreciate that. I like to have that kind of stability with my practice. But I got to admit, and now that we're on the topic, since we're going to be talking about spiritual materialism, I think it's only appropriate to admit this right out of the gate. And that is that I must say I'm a little bit disappointed because I had this phenomenal experience. I think I told you about it, where I had like really exquisite concentration, right, during a
I
meditation.
remember. Yeah.
Yes. It was fantastic. And I went and I checked the guides on the levels of shamatha. There's supposedly like 9 levels, if you will. And I was like, oh, that's the 4th level. Wow, awesome progress, And now I'm like, man, it's like back down to like 2.
Totally. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, what is going on, man? So like
Yeah.
I'm trying, no, I know, I'm not trying to get attached. I'm not clinging to this notion of levels or progress or whatever, but there is this sort of like I'd say maybe a little frustration. I think that's more like it. It's not so much disappointment. It's more just sort of like, man, where are you at, bro? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
why are you like, come on, you're meditating. Don't you remember what you're doing here? It's like
Totally.
that. And
Yeah.
so there's a little bit of sort of wishing that I just went up, 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 and never came back down. But that's apparently not how it works.
It's not how it works. Yeah. I mean, I remember it was pretty soon after I became a student with Lama Jimpa. And, I was doing really consistent shamatha like I do now. But it was like the kind of honeymoon phase of my practice where it was like, wow, I'm like, this just feels good. Like I'm starting to notice the effects and I feel like calm and I can really stay with my object for like my whole session. And there might be some distractions, but I can come back. And I remember Lama asked me one time in Darshan, he was like, so what level do you think you might be kind of like moving around in? And I was like, oh, I think like maybe I've kind of like gotten like to like level 4 sometimes, like I'm, really concentrated, not having much distraction. And he was just kind of like, okay, okay. And
Yeah.
it was so funny because like now I realize that actually those levels, like 1 through 9, they're vast.
Yeah.
Like they're almost worlds of their own. And like sometimes I imagine almost like I'm walking in this like 3D plane of like the second level of shamatha, and it's just like ongoing
Yeah.
and with myriad distractions and like and also beauties too, right? But yeah, I think what I've learned from calming the mind is that it's really like you've hit the level when you're like sustaining it, and you're actually not, you're no longer going to experience certain types of distractions or laxity or whatnot.
That's right.
So I kind of cringe when I remember telling Mama that I thought I was like getting to level 4,
Yeah.
because it's like, nope.
Right. He's like, man, I don't even know if I'm there yet.
And it kind of that started to sink in a little bit when I remember being at a talk where, I think we were talking about shamatha at one point, and Susan Farrar, she, was sharing, and she was like, I just want to get to level 4. Like that would be fantastic, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And Mama was like, yeah, that would. And it was just like, oh, right. It's a little bit
Oh,
more than what I'm thinking.
yeah, but Jack, you know that picture, the image that's used to describe those levels, of the monk and the monkey and the elephant going up the path, you know?
Yeah.
You know how the path kind of zigzags, right? So like
Labyrinth,
I
like,
imagine like here I am, I'm maybe at 1 or 2 usually, right? Let's just say I'm somewhere in there. I think that it's like I can catch little glimpses of
yeah,
like there's this sort of like, oh, I can kind of see it there in the distance. It's I think it's inspirational. If not, it's like
is.
a good motivator. Like, hey, I can see it, I can get to it. I know I can.
Totally. Yeah, I'm kind of that. I love that metaphor of, being on a trail on a mountain, because there are so many times where like on a trail, it could be a really tough trail and you're kind of switchbacking like back and forth. And then you reach like a ledge, right? Where maybe you can see like the tip of the mountain or something. And
Right.
it's really just like, oh, that's what I'm here for. Right. Okay.
That's
And
right.
it makes that whole arduous journey totally worth it, because all those breathtaking
Yeah,
moments are like, yeah, mind
exactly.
blowing. Um,
Exactly.
which is like, of course, we're not there for the blowout experience, but it is nice to have those
Wait,
moments of
what do you mean?
inspiration.
We're not?
The blowout experience?
I'm
The
kidding.
you know what the blowout experience is. We've
Yeah,
talked about
yeah. I
this.
thought we're gonna get to it though. We're gonna talk about attachment to blowout experiences in a minute,
Yes, we are.
right?
Yeah.
But first, you're gonna tell me how you're doing. What's your life like? You up to?
Yeah. Well, my life, my world in terms of like, training and practice, which is, I guess, my whole life, right? Uh, the training is interesting because I'm noticing um just this kind of like dullness, I guess, where there's this quality of like, wow, I just really am not getting to this focus thing. I'm just and in some ways it's like, okay, well maybe I can practice at that. Like our Sangha friend Dirk, I had brought that up one time. And he was like, well, what you can do in those moments is just start focusing on the dullness.
Yeah,
Like what does it feel like to feel dull?
yeah.
And really kind of like just notice what that is like. And so I've been working with that a little bit, and also working with disappointment, like you said, because I have expectations. I really
Yeah.
still have those
Mm.
expectations of what meditation should be, and what I should be doing in it. Um,
It's a tough habit
and
to shake.
it is so tough. Yeah, yeah, most definitely. Um, so I'm working with those assumptions, and also just working with like yeah, this is where I am right now.
Yeah.
And how beautiful. Wow, my journey. You know.
Yeah, you get to be aware of it.
Yeah, right. Right. Instead of like, I remember these moments of kind of like a little bit doldrummy, um and prior to taking refuge, like it's kind of a feeling of like, shit, I don't want to be here, you
Yeah.
know?
Oh,
And just to know that it's like, this is just samsara, this is life, and this too shall pass, all of that.
yep.
Um, but what's happening in my daily life practice, when I go out in the world, I go to work, go to the grocery store, all of that, is that I feel a little bit, I don't know, I guess like my compassion is maybe deepening a little bit. And I wonder if there's a correlation between like, looking at our experiences of whatever it is that we're experiencing, whether it's dullness or happiness or whatever, and it's and getting to feel what that's like, I think
Yeah.
has helped me just connect better with what other people are going through.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of one of the beautiful practical magics of meditation, is that we get to really feel what this human experience is like. And it's hard.
Yeah, you use the word deepening of like compassion, right? And it's interesting how in the beginning we have these sort of superficial notions of compassion, right? And how as it sort of sinks in a bit more, becomes a bit more real, and it's less sort of wishful thinking or whatever you want to call it. It takes on a different quality. It feels different a few meters down than it does up at the top, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it also
It's
becomes
more
less about,
sobering.
it is sobering. Yeah, definitely. And with that, it becomes less about seeing myself as separate from,
That's right.
the person I feel compassion for. It's that, oh, we're in this together. Wow. You
Mhm.
know? So yeah, it's kind of beautiful and heartbreaking,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
just that feeling of like, oh,
Uh,
my heart is opening and it hurts.
hey, sounds like you're doing it right then, Jack.
Yeah, trying. Yeah, on the path, on the path.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, so Daniel, last week we kind of introduced the topic of Lojong slogans. And we're going to be doing this as a little segment in our intro to the show. So how about we get the Lojong up on the screen and maybe do a
Heck
random
yeah.
Slowjong, Janet. Slowjong.
Lojong. Okay, no, that sounds good. Sounds good. Let's do this. So
Yeah.
I did pull up the site and I already pressed the generator button. Okay, so
Oh, okay.
it's
Cool.
already on the screen. Okay, here we go.
All
How
right.
appropriate.
Ah,
Yeah, first we train in the preliminaries.
I love it. I love it. Can you read it for us?
Yeah, no problem. So first, train in the preliminaries. This is point 1 of 7. Point 1 has only one slogan or instruction, which is train in the preliminaries. And the preliminaries are that we're referring to are your precious human birth, impermanence and death, the unsatisfactory nature of cyclic existence, and the inescapable results of cause and effect. And there's this really
Beautiful.
nice image down here. It's not related, but it's a nice little Tibetan work of art. All
It
right.
is nice that they include that. I
I
like
like
that.
it. I
Yeah.
dig it. I'm so glad that it's there.
Yeah. Nice. Thanks for having it up there for us.
How neat
Um,
that it was truly random, huh? And it shows up point number
Number
1.
one. It's incredible. Yeah. So yeah, the train in the preliminaries, obviously foundational. Um, and I know we talked about it a little bit last week, and I'm seeing here that we've got a comment from Chet. I guess we just have to keep chopping wood. Helpful to know and remember the path isn't straight up. Yeah, thank you, Chet.
Well, you know,
Totally agree.
Chet's absolutely right. I mean, if you think about it, he's actually suggesting, I think, that training in the preliminaries, in a sense, is chopping wood, right? We have to keep coming back to point number one again and again and
Yep.
again and again. And my understanding in from listening to Lama is that for those folks who quit walking the path, so to speak, it's because they quit training in the preliminaries. They stopped chopping
Uh,
wood, so to speak. So.
yeah. And if you're not keeping that foundational practice, where like the metaphor of that is, chopping wood so we can survive, keep ourselves warm, um, then yeah, we're not going to survive. We're going to slip. We're going to flounder. Things won't make sense, right? Like the Dharma doesn't make sense unless you have those foundational points. Um, and ethical practice just falls apart. Um,
So what do you think?
yeah,
What do you think on the first of the preliminaries? Maybe we can just like briefly talk about them. What do
yeah.
you? I gotta admit, I don't always feel like my human birth is precious. You know, I sometimes lose sight of that. You want to talk about maybe why it is precious, mine and yours?
Sure. Um, well, as a human, we have a lot of capacity to learn and change and grow, and also notice our experience if we're willing to. Um, and in kind of like traditional Dharma, there's these like 6 different like types of beings, sentient beings. And out of all of those beings, even compared to the ones that have like higher kind of powers, like, demigods or gods or whatever, um, the human realm is seen as the one where there's like this almost perfect combination of like uh, easefulness and struggle.
Yeah, it's like the Goldilocks zone.
Right. Yeah. And it certainly doesn't mean that it's easy, but it's like we need a certain amount of challenge and a certain amount of rest, to be able to do this.
Right.
And especially, I mean, I think of my precious human life, and it is incredible when I think about the opportunities that I have, spiritual opportunities,
Mhm.
um, because I think that's part of the precious human life, is that thinking about yourself as a practitioner, what do you have available to yourself? And I live somewhere where I have a teacher who's teaching me directly. I meet with him one on one. It's incredible. It's insurmountably incredible. And I have Sangha friends, people like Daniel, like that we get to talk about things together. And these are just like such precious things. I think that's really why they call it precious, is that it's like, it is that those like gems.
Right.
So it's like, I think it's just recognizing where you're at, that preciousness, being like, oh my God, that's right. I have
That's right.
these are the conditions for my enlightenment.
That's right, exactly. So even if you take those different realms metaphorically and apply them solely to humans, right? That there's hungry, hungry ghosts, if you will, and then there's
Right,
gods and demigods among humans. That
right,
if you're a godlike human, or you're a preta human or a hungry ghost human or whatever you want to call it, or a hell being human, you don't have your opportunity, your causes, the conditions of your life don't allow you to practice dharma, right? Like
right,
they don't allow for it because you're too busy either focused on the lovely life of the gods, right, and pursuing wealth and fame and that kind of thing, or you're just dealing with ordinary, like trying to survive, right?
right,
And so in
right,
those situations, like those conditions are not good, for practicing. But in our case, for whatever, however, our karma is just right, I suppose, right? And like
yeah,
you said, I mean, we have our sangha, we have access to the teachings, the dharma itself, right? And not just a little bit. We have, I mean, it's not just an earful. We have as much as we can possibly stomach, right?
Yeah.
And then we have a teacher to help us out of all of our confusion, right?
Right.
And like, man, it's just so precious. So
Yeah.
let's not lose sight of that one.
Yeah. That's even, yeah, I like that one for kind of like a daily reflection, just that, like, let me just kind of ground myself in all that I have right now. And there's a lot of gratitude that can come out of that.
Yep. Along,
Yeah.
well, the rest of them too. I mean, right? They kind of tie into each other, right? When we start to think about it, and we're like, oh, right, everything's changing. You said it already in the show. This too shall pass, right? Everything is impermanent. Everything's moving. Everything's changing, and that includes
Yeah.
our, these bodies, these lives, right? These whatever these things that we are. It's all gonna
Right.
pass along, right? It's gonna continue on, and
Right.
that's sobering. That's something that helps us to sort of wake up a bit when we're like, oh, right, this thing that I'm clinging to as permanent, either permanent self or everything out there is solid, and somehow there's self and other and all of that. When we really meditate on impermanence and death, it mellows that out a lot.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Yeah. And remembering that, these conditions really to take advantage now, like right now. Do not hesitate, like don't falter, like just get in there.
That's
um
right.
and whatever's in our way, because sometimes I remember too that I'm like, I'm someone who's really enthusiastic about my Dharma practice, but maybe I wasn't always that way, or I wasn't ready. And so, it might be for some people that it's like, okay, yeah, maybe I've got like this opportunity, but I don't feel ready. Like that's okay too. But just like examining, okay, where are you at then? Or what kind of obstacles is there a fear of like, um, uh, being under an authority or something like that? What are the kind of things that trigger
Right.
you? And like kind of just examine it and see, like, is there a way for me to overcome that or work with it, so that I really can dive into spiritual practice. Um, yeah.
As Chet says, now's a great time to be embodied.
That's right. Yeah.
I like that.
Thanks, Chet. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, we touched, I think, a little bit on the other points, at least the third point about the unsatisfactory nature of cyclic existence. That one doesn't need a lot of description or a lot of talk, does it?
Yeah, it's kind of just obvious.
It's kind of obvious, right? Like there's a lot of suffering or just dissatisfaction with ordinary
Dissatisfaction,
cyclic
yeah.
existence.
Or fear of, losing the things that we finally got, it's just so
All those
miserable.
things, all of those things.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, I think this particular slogan is a pretty good segue into spiritual materialism, right? Because
Yeah.
if we're not focusing on these things, then we'll really start to concretize our identity and all the kind of things that we want for this life. So yeah, you want to dive in? Spiritual materialism?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Great. Well, I know this term from a book that Choyam Trungpa Rinpoche wrote. Yeah, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. And I have to admit, Daniel, I have not started diving into this book yet, but I'm so excited. And, preparing for this conversation, I got another, little taste of the teachings, and this stuff is profound.
Oh my God. Oh my God. So it was just one of the most, like it's the one that I finished most recently before I started the next one. And I have to say it was powerful. It was really powerful. It was corrective, right?
Corrective.
It was
Yeah.
corrective, in the sense that there were so many moments in reading the book where I was like, oh, that's what I've been doing.
It's pointing at
Oh,
me.
yeah, like, oh, this is me. This is me. And I think that's one of the things that I've heard said before about spiritual materialism is that as a topic, it's really helpful when it is about how I'm spiritually materialistic, it's not particularly helpful to examine other people through
Yeah.
the lens of
Yeah. Yeah.
spiritual materialism, right? So
Right.
like, wait, like let's not go looking at everybody else and say, well, they look at them, they're doing this and they're doing that. That would be the wrong way to use this kind of information, right?
Totally.
But it was eye-opening. I have to admit, there were a number of different times where I was just like, oh, this is, oh no, like this, I can't believe it. Like, yes, that's me, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful, I won't give away all of it, but there's this one thing that was amazing. Trungpa does an excellent job of describing the links of dependent origination, how the ego is formed, right? There's like the steps. He uses a metaphor of a monkey, and that's all I'm going to say about it. And at the end of that chapter, I had a really good laugh and thinking about my monkeyhood.
Oh man, well, would you be able to break down like what does spiritual materialism mean?
I'm not going to use my own words if that's okay with you.
Sure, yeah.
So I actually think so. There's I think it's like a 6 or 7 minute brief video on YouTube by Tenzin Palmo, who I absolutely adore. And I think that her little talk about spiritual materialism is the most succinct. Like really, like if you wanted a Reader's Digest of like what it is, what it means, and how to combat it or avoid it. I think like that talk is just amazing. And what she says is, spiritual materialism is any spiritual practice that is based on the idea, even if we don't admit it to ourselves, of becoming more important, enlightened, and more spiritual, right? So anything that's sort of like, that's based on us becoming something like an enlightened being, right? Like
Yeah.
becoming more powerful, becoming a better person or whatever. And I think one of the things that I really loved about her little talk actually was she says that this is why working on developing bodhicitta, and particularly why Lojong training is so
Interesting.
important, right? And I couldn't, like, absolutely right. Basically that, and this is I think really quite eye-opening, is that basically until we make a complete turn, like we can maybe be on the path, right, for all kinds of reasons. All of those reasons are spiritual materialism, all of them, until we make a complete turn to where every breath that we take is for the benefit of others, right?
Wow.
Until that happens, until that sort of bodhicitta takes hold, everything else is spiritual materialism, everything, right? And I thought it was interesting that Tenzin Palmo actually echoes something that Trungpa says himself. He says so basically he says spiritual materialism is when in the name of egohood, we try to become a greater person, a wise person. And he says this is one of the most dangerous, most problematic things. And he says it is in fact Satanism, right?
Oh.
Right. And what I thought, what's interesting, so he's like really strongly, he's like that, like you can tell, right? That's pretty powerful language to be
Yeah.
using. And Tenzin Palmo says, in slightly softer words, the demon ego will eat us up, right?
Wow.
If we don't practice in such a way that we can make that turn, so that it's no longer about us, but it's about the well-being of everyone.
Right. It's almost like so it's like this kind of self-aggrandizement, right? Like using spiritual practices, spirituality, knowledge, to kind of enhance and improve the individual relative self.
Yeah.
And how harmful that is, because spiritual practices can give you a lot of strength and power and
Yep.
wisdom. But if you're still coming from that mindset, that it's almost like, I kind of imagine it as like an accessory, like seeing enlightenment as an accessory
Yeah.
to my individual self, rather than just the nature of our being,
Right.
actually.
Yeah.
That is, you can't possess the nature of our being. And we kind of see these parallels in our world of how that happens. Lama and I have had conversations, about the environment and, kind of like the mess that we're in, culturally, socially, politically, and whatnot. And he says, like, we are the environment. We can't own any of this, so we can kind of see it trickle down into our ideas of like private property and whatnot. But that's kind of a tangent, but I just noticed that parallel a little bit. So yeah, it's like we can't own these things. We are them.
Right.
We just are enlightenment. That's our nature when it comes down to it. But yeah, to try and kind of like tailor it into, okay, this is how I make myself look really just fucking cool.
Yeah.
And like I can control people now. Like, oh, I've got like these followers, it's just like,
Exactly.
yeah,
It's one of the reasons why there's actually pretty strong language against lamas or gurus that fall into this trap, right? Because
mhm.
like in that case, that's real sort of powerful sort of demon, if you
Oh
will.
yeah.
Uh,
Demon
yeah,
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, right. But
That's
there's
where cult
another
leaders, yeah.
there's another aspect to it which I think is really sort of pertinent. It kind of is like what you talked about at the beginning of the show, with the way that your practice was in the sort of when it really started to get going and you noticed all of these improvements. Like life got better, right?
Yeah.
Your mind, things kind of calmed down a little bit, things got easier somehow. Like and that's a part of it, is that we have these sort of experiences through meditation or whatever, where it's not just about becoming like some kind of powerful magician or something like that, but rather that life becomes kind of easier or better somehow. And
Yeah.
one of the things about spiritual materialism, is that we end up kind of trying to use these tools instead of dealing with reality as it is, right? Including the hard, rough, shitty stuff. We kind of try to like twist it a little bit in order to smooth things out, to feel comfortable, right? To
Yeah.
when we're to make ourselves like okay somehow, to pacify ourselves. It's sort of like the idea that like religion is the opiate of the masses, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so we can use spiritual practices as a way to kind of to numb ourselves, to make things to take off the hard edges and the sharpness and the things that hurt, right? All of our confusion and stuff, and explain things away. That also is spiritual materialism, right? And what
Yeah.
the thing is that this is one thing that Trungpa makes really clear in the book, um, is that the ego can take anything at all, including spirituality, and twist it to its own uses. So we have to be, on the lookout for it, because it's gonna keep popping up again and again. And I think it becomes, my sense is that it probably becomes more and more subtle over time, right?
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it's sort of this gross kind of materialism, which I'm happy to talk about my own experiences with that. Yeah, because that's how I got here.
Yeah, same.
For sure, without a doubt. And and then I think that it just becomes a little bit more subtle, a little bit more subtle. We have to always be on the lookout to see how we're clinging, trying to take some kind of ownership of our views, our experiences, or something. Our lineage, right? That's one thing that in the beginning I was sort of like, ooh, I'm in this special tradition,
Right.
right?
We
Like,
we make it
yeah,
we make it an identity.
bingo,
And
bingo.
I think that's especially, that's where a lot of us, who are vulnerable to yeah, just not really knowing who we are, maybe in a relative sense, is that it's like we can get into these spiritual spaces and be like, oh, and now that's me. you know um and it just becomes another identity. And I think that can happen too if like I was watching this talk on the book by Siddhartha's Intense Study. They're a group that reads text together.
Oh,
And
what's it called? I'm gonna look it up.
yeah, Siddhartha's Intent Study.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And he was saying how we have this tendency, especially, in the West, right, where we're coming to Buddhist spaces, maybe it's unfamiliar, it feels a little exotic,
Oh yeah.
it's
Uh,
and we're like, oh, we're getting into this ancient tradition, this kind of
mm,
magical tradition, which is also kind of a version of like cultural appropriation, right? Um,
indeed.
but it's this way we're seeing it as external. It's like, oh, there's this kind of other cool thing that I can like, delve into and see how it affects my mindset, and it's so instead of seeing it as like directly, we're trying to learn about our experience through, some of these, what seem like, exotic and ancient practices. um that's just yeah, we're just lost. We're just lost in seeing it as something separate from us rather than just our experience.
Yeah.
So I found that really interesting because I totally kind of drifted into that a little bit too, because it is cool. I mean, you go inside the temple and it's just like so engaging, right? The imagery and whatnot. Um, but yeah, until I started learning about like tantra and whatnot, and the purposes of tantra and why they look that way, it was just like this kind of like exotic, otherly thing that I was like,
Uh-huh.
approaching in that way. Yeah, it was interesting.
Exactly. I think that part of it is like certainly for me, I my sense was always like I never like one of the hard I think the bane of my existence. Many of my friends have commented on this over the years, but the bane of my existence has been this question, what do you want? Right.
Hmm.
And I've had such a hell of a time with that question and sort of have, because like basically I've always seen myself as so special, both in a good way and a bad way, right?
I get
So unique,
it.
so different than everybody else, right? That I couldn't possibly want, like, and I was like, no, riches, no, fame, no, success at work, no, all these, the normal sort of pursuits, no, of course not. That's not for
Yeah.
me. I'm special. I'm different, right?
Yeah.
And then, there was this sort of like the notion of whatever spiritual enlightenment. I was like, oh, that
Try that
sounds
one a little bit.
that sounds pretty good. I've never met an enlightened person. I don't know anyone who's enlightened, but that sounds really good, right? Like the ultimate sort of achievement
The ultimate specialness.
the ultimate, the highest of the high specialness, right? And so there was this sort of attraction to it from that point of view, where I was like, yeah, okay, like it's hard to do, not everybody can get it, happens only to the most special of the special, all of that kind of nonsense, right? That was a part of it. And then, like, and even slightly before that, there was this sense of like, I always wanted to get higher, right? It's just like I was saying about my meditation. I always wanted to get higher and higher and higher and higher. I wanted to achieve different levels of transcendence and something that was out of the ordinary, something that was not mundane, not everyday existence, not just like this stuff, right? Like there's got
Yeah.
to be something else, right? There's got to be, something beyond this, something,
Yeah. There's
you know,
the veil
that's
over
right.
everything. Or like we're in the Matrix. Yeah, that's how.
Exactly. That's why I love psychedelics so much, right? I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm gonna go beyond the veil, and I have these crazy experiences, these blowout kind of experiences and
Right.
whatnot, and just wanting to like chase that. Oh my gosh, Chet just called me out. I'm sorry, I got to point it out. He says it's the Leo path, dealing with specialness.
I love it. You totally picked them.
Am I blushing? I feel like I'm blushing. Yes. Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
sweet, though.
Totally. Right. So there was that feeling, right? Like, oh, it's got to be like this. And so like there was this sort of sense of like you were talking about. This is exotic. This is different.
Yeah.
This isn't just the Buddhism that I learned about in school, right? This
Yeah.
isn't this isn't the great vehicle. This isn't the lower vehicle, whatever. My mind was telling me this is the third, the highest, the best, the most sort of secret. Ooh, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, yeah, like all those things made it so attractive to me. I was just like, yeah, yeah, all of that stuff, right? And that's how I got on the path. And I would just say Trungpa also says that enlightenment is ego's ultimate disappointment. And I
Love
would
it.
say, I'm not suggesting at all that I'm enlightened, but I'm just saying like this path towards that, it does have a lot of disappointment.
It does.
There's actually, I think there's what Trungpa says. I wrote it down here. I thought it was really great. He was actually talking about surrendering surrender in general, but surrendering to a teacher. But he says actually that what we need to do is to be wide open beyond fascination and expectation. So fascination and expectation is certainly something I was doing. And then we have to surrender our hopes, surrender our fears, and march directly into disappointment. And
Yeah.
he knew something, right? Like definitely.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, like, there is that feeling of like, oh, like I gotta like man, I'll never forget. I my very first practice of the phases of the moon practice that Dirk leads. Right. There's one tonight, by the way. I'm going to go to it. I'm looking forward to it. But that was one of the, I think that was the first sort of non-shamatha practice that I did, right? That was a little bit of the sort of tantric, whatever. It was not, but like, anyway, it was a little bit different than what I was used to. And it was in person at the temple when Dirk was here. And I remember, like, first of all, I was like, ooh, moon practice. This is part of the exotic, secret stuff that only the special people do. So of course I was all into it, right? And I show up and I'm like, oh, this is weird. It's just meditation. Like, like, like it's just a little bit different than what we normally do, but not that much different. And then afterward, Dirk, he must have sensed something. I didn't say anything, but he just caught me at the door. And I know I've said this before, but he said, Daniel, this isn't magic and it's not going to get you high. And talk about being, the
bitter pill.
That was harsh. I don't know how I stuck around after that, because that was like, that's what I was here for. That's what I wanted.
Right. Wow. So like, and it's so interesting how like, in some ways we have to be a little bit grateful for our, our weirdo stuff that gets us in the door, right?
That's right.
Because that's how we come to the Dharma, is that we have these kind of wacko beliefs about how it's going to, like change our life and all this stuff. But yeah, then it gets us in the door. And for some reason, we stay even when we're disappointed, because I think you maybe realize like, okay, that means there's something real here.
Yeah.
Like if someone's willing to tell me that, that's some realness right there. And I'm attracted to that. Like that, I think that's really like drew me into Lama, is that he's always just real with me.
Yeah.
And I haven't even really had Lama get like upset with me or anything. He's just straight up, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, we were talking last week, Daniel, about some of that disappointment that comes up, right? Like I think in our intros, you were sharing like, is this a thing for you too? Like, do you feel just a little bit like someone's popped the balloon? And I totally, I'm glad that we're doing, this conversation tonight, because I think it really validates that process and experience of being like, shit, like this is the reality of things, and samsara is hard, and I'm not going to find my ideal samsara through spiritual practice.
Yeah,
like samsara is going to continue to suck.
Exactly. Actually, that's the weird part about it. It's exactly that. We come in through with some kind of weird notions. At least it seems like everyone has whatever their thing is, like gets them in the door. And then I think that it's exactly the way that you described Lama, right? Or your experiences with him. It's just real talk, right? And when you hear it, and not just from Lama, right? The Dharma as a whole, it's just real. It's not, it's just real talk across the board about everything, like it's not painting any kind of a glossy picture or anything. It just, this is how it is. Right. And there's something
Yeah.
so refreshing about that after having so much self-deception and delusion and all of that, right? Cluttering up our minds. There's something really attractive about just like, yeah, let's just be real about the way things are. And that,
Yeah.
that begins to, you notice a little shift where you're like, oh, wow. Oh, right. Ah, okay. And it's just kind of like that, right? Like it's just this like little baby stepping our way, into it. It's beautiful. It's very
Yeah.
tricky.
It really is. Yeah. Oh, I'm curious to hear a little bit about, some of the things that got you in the door. I know the kind of blowout experiences, wanting to kind of get high or like reach that specialness. But what else? What are some of your other things?
I was gonna ask you because I already thought no, it was really that. I
Those,
came
yeah,
to I came to meditation because I whatever, I won't go into the long story again, but I came to meditation to calm my mind and I found that it worked. And I
yeah,
didn't have any other expectations. I was not into Buddhism. In fact, I strived really, really hard to avoid all the religious aspects of the temple. I avoided that like hardcore, like something, there was like a force field around it that kept me out. And eventually, I just started, like I was saying, like just little baby steps, little gradual, like, okay. And but really the whole thing was nothing more than wanting to get some magic and get high. That was it.
yeah,
Transcend the ordinary. That was literally it. I wanted nothing else. There was nothing else that was pulling me into it. And I know
for
that
sure.
maybe we share some of that, but I'm kind of curious more about like, what about you? What got you in the door?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I didn't really recognize that or have the idea that, oh, I could get high by this stuff until like later on. Like that kind of that issue came up later on. But yeah, I really started going to the temple because I wanted to um calm my mind. But when I think about it, and go a little bit deeper than that, like the reason I wanted to calm my mind was to escape.
Yeah.
So escapism, wanting
Yeah.
wanting to avoid the reality of my situation, um, wanting to make myself into, some just otherly kind of just calm, like don't get affected by
Oh,
anything. I'm
mm,
just chill, right? And that's all bullshit, like that. It's just it, but I think that like there's some goodness in that, right? Like to be able to calm our, intense afflictive emotions and whatnot. But there's not going to be a space where I'm just what I think actually was that they're like wanting to be numb to what was happening, really.
yeah. Yeah.
And that's not calmness. That's numb. That's not feeling anything.
Right. Well, now that you mention it, I think that was, the same. There was a
Yeah.
lot of that going on. And how weird is it? You walked into the one place where, you simply can no longer avoid, right? You can no longer escape. If you're going to stick around, you're going to turn you right around and say, look
Yeah.
at that right
Yeah.
there.
And what's crazy is that I've been, going deeper into like, okay, well, what are more of the kind of like little spiritual materialistic things that I get into? And um, one thing that's popped up in the last few months is control.
Mm-mm.
So I had this really interesting experience, and I think I may have talked about it on the show before. Um, but a while back, I'm part of a committee at work where we work on like kind of issues related to equity and whatnot. And I'm a co-chair. So there's three other people who are co-chairs of this committee. And during one of our meetings, we had someone, not a co-chair, speak up and kind of vocalize that they were a little bit frustrated by how the meetings were going and that there really wasn't much getting done. And they kind of like did a really excellent job of like showing how like we could facilitate this meeting. And then they kind of took off and started facilitating the meeting. And afterwards I was like, I was really working with my mind. I was kind of doing like the self-talk, just examining like, why am I so irritated at this person? Really, they showed wonderful skill, skills that I want to learn from, skills that I want to develop in myself, right? So why am I seeing them as an enemy? And so I sat down for shamatha meditation, and my mind was all over the place, really scattered, kept coming back to my breath. And there was this just moment of quiet where my mind had kind of settled down. And there was this voice that came in, my voice, and it said, and this, meaning meditation, this is how you get control back.
Oh,
and I was like,
no.
oh shit. Like in the meditation, I was just like, no way. And so that was it. It was, I showed my face, right? I showed my face, and I was able to see like, wow, that's partly what I've been doing meditation for, is that I want control over myself, and I want control within my environment, right? And that person made me feel less in control, right?
So okay, so what'd you do with that? Just sort of,
I was just like, wow. And I mean, part of, I like really in my meditation, I wanted to like reach out and like grab like it by the jugular. Like there was this like intense feeling of like that's you, that's ego right there.
I see it.
And it was fantastic. It was so like important that I got to see that. Because if that little guy continues to stay like, just under the surface and working its, little devilry without me noticing it or knowing about it, then it could get ugly, right? And there's been ways that control issues have been ugly for me before. So I was really happy that happened. And while there's, there was certainly like a element of like shame, right? Where it's like, oh, like, God, that's ugly, right? Like a little bit of embarrassment that this person who was like really actually just kind of a wonderful person could make me feel like so like, ugh, how dare you? There was that like, oh, I don't like that gross feeling inside me,
No. Oh, I love this story. I love it. It's weird. It's the weirdest thing. So I was talking to a friend of mine today who described nearly word for word the exact same experience. They're not on a Buddhist path, but they describe this exact same type of thing where a total lovely human being, nice, nothing bad happened. They said something, and all of a sudden they got flared up, and they noticed this sort of like ickiness that you're talking about there. And I can't help it, but I feel like it's such a great example of that sort of simple teaching that when that arises, this arises, right? That self and other actually co-arise. They're coming up at the same time. So you perceive this other very clearly. There's something powerful happening. There's something there that causes you to come up as well, your ego to sort of come up at the exact same time, right? And the difference, what's so cool about it, what I just think is phenomenal, is that you get to be aware of it, right? Like you get to see it. You get to see it. And I think it's kind of cool. I like when this kind of stuff happens because I get a little chuckle out of it. I like it. Like it's kind of like it's like, oh, there you are. Like,
it's that little hurt part, right?
Exactly.
It's that part that's been in the shadows and stays in the shadows, and it's like trying to figure out like, what am I, and like what's the purpose of life, and what's the purpose of all of this bullshit, all the confusion, all the ignorance, right? All the attachment, all the aversion, all of these kind of ways that it gets like stuck inside of us. It's fascinating.
Like you said, like when you were sitting there in shamatha, all of a sudden you saw yourself, like you saw it, like a beautiful, clean mirror, right? What do they call it? Mirror-like wisdom, so to speak, right? Like you see it, and it's so cool because then like you get to be aware, and you're like, oh, it's empty.
Right.
It's oh, and it's not a pushing away. It's not a letting nothing. It's just like oh, there you are. And like my friend was telling me, they were like, you shouldn't take a mocking tone with yourself when you notice yourself like that, because I was like, no, it's fine. Sometimes depending on which little demon shows its little head up, right? Sometimes I do that little Tara Brach thing, put my hand on my heart, and I say, it's not your fault.
Mm.
Come on, sweetheart, it's okay, right? Like a little gentle, like it's fine. Because sometimes there's that hurt, broken, sad little boy or whatever, that kind of stuff that comes
Yeah.
up. But sometimes it's just a stupid, silly little demon, right? You just want to like smack it on the butt and just be like, all right, get out of here. Come on
Yeah.
now. Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I love that. Like the all of this stuff, like Trungpa Rinpoche is saying, has this potential for being incredibly harmful, right? But if we can start to see it, if we can bring it to light, bring that shadow kind of side
Yeah.
to light, and just almost put like a face to it, then we can start to see like, oh, it's actually, it's not that big of a deal, and I
Right.
can release it. It's possible. And we have to hold that reminder always that that potential for us to transform and change is there all the time.
That's
And
right.
so when that comes up, it doesn't mean that you are bad. It doesn't mean that I am bad, or that I am a jealous person or a prideful person or whatever.
Or a
It's
controlling person, Jack.
right. Yeah, it's just that I've got those things kind of stuck
Yeah.
on me, and I'm just
Yeah.
trying to see it, let it go.
It's sort
Yeah.
of like that. It sort of reminds me of like what do you call it? Chode practice, right? Like you sort of like, you can even ask it like, hey, what do you need, right? Like
Yeah.
here, oh, hello, controlling little self or whatever, what is it that you need right now? Why are you
Yeah.
here? What's up? What's up? How
Yeah.
can I help you?
Right.
Right?
Maybe you just need something to do. Like, here, I'm gonna
That's
give
it.
you something to
Yeah,
do.
yeah, exactly. I love it.
Oh man, I'm almost like sad that we're to 8 o'clock. I feel like this is such a fun topic, and it's been a true joy to be able to talk with you about it.
Yeah, me too. I love it. I think it's good stuff. Like I said, I think that like when we get to be aware and see these patterns of like egoic sort of mind and how it works and operates, like it's kind of fun actually, right?
Yeah,
Like it
it's
can be,
exciting.
like yeah, sometimes it hurts and sometimes it's sad and everything, but like a lot of times it's just kind of fun. You're like, oh right, like there I am, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And when we've got the amazing amount of support
yeah.
that's around us, we can really do it. We really can. We
We
have the
totally
support.
can do it. We can. I couldn't agree more. And I'm glad that Chet joined us tonight. I thought that was fun.
I
I
had
hope.
so much fun. Yeah, Chet, I love that you leave comments. And for anyone who's joining us, if you join on Zoom, you can leave questions and comments, and we'll be able to read them. It's a little bit harder to track the Facebook, but that's maybe something we can consider in the future. But
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Well, and if if you want to, you can always subscribe to the podcast.
that's right. Yeah. Like, subscribe, and comment,
Hit
all
that
that
like
stuff.
button. Yeah, subscribe. I don't know. I don't know how to say it. We'll have to get
I don't
that
know
pitch.
either.
We'll have to get that pitch down.
Yeah, we will. All right,
Thank,
Daniel. Well,
thank you,
thank
Jack.
you.
Appreciate
Yes,
you.
appreciate you. And thanks all for coming.
Take care.
Bye.